This video is sponsored by Normandy 1998, Ash, Christopher Mitchell and 212th Trooper. Hey everyone, for a while now I've been thinking about the black and white sequel games, since they're a fascinating part of Pokemon's history, breaking the mold that had been around since Gen 1 by replacing the usual definitive edition with true sequels. While Gold and Silver could be considered sequels to Red and Blue, this is on a whole other level, as they are set in Unova, but an expanded version of the region that allows the passage of time to be clearly shown, while making this go around more interesting for players who've already gone through the region once in the last game. Despite how good a concept this is, this trend does not continue with X and Y, getting neither a definitive edition nor a sequel, and Sun and Moon getting what really feels like a director's cut of the original with some DLC thrown in to justify the price tag of a new release. However, what if the concept of sequels carried over to Gen 6 and beyond, with each game getting them as their follow-up release? What kind of games would we get? Well, today I'm looking to answer that question, though before I do, I just want to cover some ground rules. First and foremost, these hypothetical games will be replacing the additional releases following the start of a generation, so that means definitive editions like Crystal and Emerald, DLC, and whatever the Ultra games are, so for the sake of this thought experiment, they never existed and never will. Secondly, as these games are modeled on Black 2 and White 2, it can be assumed the basic plot of challenging the gyms and completing the Pokédex is still occurring, and so will not be discussed in too much depth beyond the basics, though changes to gym leaders, Elite Four members, champions, and evil teams will be elaborated on where present, along with any relevant added Pokémon. And finally, since these games are being treated as part of the generation in which they would have been released, likely coming out a year or two after the original game, they will only have Pokemon mechanics and functionality that these games could realistically have, so there won't be regional variants or terrestrialization in X and Y 2. Speaking of which, as the games directly following Black and White 2, Gen 6 seems the appropriate place to start, and where better to start than with the starter Pokemon and starting town. In the vein of Black and White 2, the starting town will be somewhere entirely new called Clavania Town, which is located in the large swath of unexplored land in the northeast section of Mountain Kalos. Subsequently, its name, Clavania, is derived from clove, as the naming convention of Closian settlements is to do with aromatic plants like vanilla for Vanilleville, and Montagne, meaning mountain in French. Also, just gonna get this out of the way, I will be using a lot of French, so if my pronunciation or accent is bad, I sincerely apologize. I did my best to try and look up pronunciations and where possible listen to the words spoken, but I recognize this isn't nearly the same as being a native speaker or having studied the language. Nonetheless, I hope you all bear with me and enjoy my ideas for this hypothetical game. Due to being an out-of-the-way mountainous settlement, Clavania is fairly small like most starting towns, while also being disconnected from the rest of Kalos, to explain its lack of accessibility in X and Y. This would be the impetus for the start of the story, which would begin with Dexio and Cena coming to Clavania as part of a greater research project around the aftermath of the ultimate weapon being fired in the climax of the last game, which would be where the player learns that it has been 2 years since then, and not all of the after effects are yet known or fully understood. Upon speaking to the pair of researchers, Cena and Dexio would explain that they're looking for someone to lead them up to the Ranome Plateau at the top of the mountain, which might be connected to the incident, with the protagonist then volunteering to help. Speaking of the protagonist, they would, as usual, be either male or female at the player's discretion, and while nameable, their canon names would be Claire and Pierre, as both are of French origin, with Claire being a loose homophone for colère, which is French for anger, and Pierre for peur, meaning fear, to contrast Serena and Callum, whose names are derived from serene and calm respectively. Returning to the story, due to the plateau being beyond Route 24, Cena and Dexio would agree to loan the player one of the 3 Kalos starters they just happen to have on hand, with this being how the player chooses their starter. From here the player would begin heading up the route, which due to being a mountain path would contain Pokemon like Bunnelby, and assorted early route flying types, both from Kalos and potentially previous regions, as well as Geodudes, with this making a decent enough gauntlet until the protagonist and their companions reach a point where rock sliders block their path, halting their progress any further, while allowing Cena and Dexio to exposit that there have been a lot of strange natural disasters in the last 2 years, almost like nature is out of balance. However, it is not a total dead end, as the protagonist will find a small faded green crystal orb which excites Cena and Dexio, who speculate that this stone could be connected to the strange natural phenomena, and that they would be grateful if the protagonist would travel to Lumio City to show this stone to the professor in person, even agreeing to let them keep their borrowed starter as thanks, and gifting them a Pokédex to make the start of their journey official. With this, the pair would depart to brief the professor on upon the protagonist's arrival, allowing them to return home and then start making their way down the mountain through Route 23, which would likewise be filled with mountainous early route Pokemon, including Sandshrew, as it was only available in the Friend Safari in X and Y and has pretty low base stats. At the bottom of the mountain, the player would find a train station, allowing them to board a train to Corraway Town, making this the explanation to where the mysterious train goes, while setting Corraway up as the archetypical second town in the vein of Cherry Grove City, Old Dale Town, and even Aquacord Town in the first games. Due to another of these mysterious natural disasters, this time flooding which has destroyed the bridge on Route 18, the player would be forced to travel south down Route 19 to Snowbell City, where they will challenge the Snowbell Gym, now operated by Wulfric's granddaughter Blanche, whose name is derived from snow and white in French, keeping up the ice theming. Due to being a relatively new gym leader, Blanche won't give the player much trouble while allowing them to cut their teeth on battling before travelling along Route 21 and 22, which would naturally have Pokemon of a more appropriate level for new trainers compared to the higher level ones players find in X and Y, before ultimately arriving in Santaloon City, where a more experienced Viola is now primed to be second gym leader material. After swatting her bugs, it would be a hop, skip and a jump to Lumio City in the Sycamore Pokemon Lab. The protagonist would introduce themselves to Professor Sycamore and show him the green stone they found, with Sycamore explaining this is a keystone seemingly imbued with the power of the legendary Pokemon Zygarde, meaning not only can it grant the wielder the power of Mega Evolution, but it can also act as a vessel for Zygarde cells, which have been appearing around Kalos for the last few years. To demonstrate, he then places Zygarde cell he had gathered for study against this Keystone Z as he dubs it, with the soul being absorbed into the orb which is now a little less faded. Evidently pleased with this result, Sycamore would then ask the protagonist to gather up as many Zygarde souls as they can, and meld them with the Keystone Z, since this may well be the secret to understanding the connection between Mega Evolution, the legendary Pokemon Zygarde, and why it has seemingly abandoned Kalos to suffer all these natural disasters. It will be during this time the player would meet their rival, Claire or Pierre, depending on which character they chose, who in contrast to the much maligned rivals of X and Y, will be the only traditional rival, though we'll get to that later. Upon being offered their pick of the remaining starters, they would choose the starter strong against yours, but would still be for the most part friendly, revealing that while they don't have a Keystone Z, they still want to figure out this mystery and save Kalos, part of which means getting stronger, so they'll be battling you loads so you can both rise to new heights. Unsurprisingly, this would lead to a battle, and after either winning or losing, the rival would depart. However, before the protagonist could do likewise, Sycamore would stop them and state that he has one more gift as thanks for their assistance in his research, that being their choice of Johto's starter and their respective Megastones, since each now has a Mega Evolution for their final form, with the explanation given being that following the burst of Infinity Energy 2 years ago, a dozen or so new Mega Evolutions had emerged, including these three, which are now Grass Fairy because of the magical nature of Mega Meganium, with its ability to calm anger and revive dead greenery, Water Dark in the case of Feraligatr, since a more angry and powerful Croc definitely deserves to acquire the evil typing as it's known in Japan, and Fire Ground because of the Volcano Pokemon, it seems only natural that Mega-type Typhlosion becomes less about fire and more about lava. Following this acquisition, the player would then leave Sycamore Labs to continue their journey, the next step of which is to battle Clemont in the Lumiose Gym, who is now the third gym leader, with his battle being somewhat similar to the original games albeit at a lower level. With this out of the way, it will be time to leave Lumiose City, though before the protagonist can, there is one more figure they have to meet, a mysterious bearded man in a mask and hooded cloak who introduces himself as Radiata, or in the Japanese version, Manjushage. While I don't have Japanese names for all the characters, this one I do, since in the course of my research for this video I discovered that this is the folkloric name for the red-spide lily, from which Radiata also gets his English name, and wanted to share that with you, though I'll get back to the significance of this namesake at a later point. All that matters currently is that Radiata wants to battle, and after testing the protagonist, will conclude they are worthy of his help, claiming that he has knowledge of Zygarde and will share it with you, along with any Zygarde cells he recovers when you meet again, before vanishing in an enigmatic fashion. From here, the game will begin to open up as it does with most Pokemon games, as the player would head southwest to Solage City to challenge Grant, with this finally being the gym to give those who picked Fennekin a challenge, as he would be using 3 fossil Pokemon, having added Aerodactyl to his roster in the 2 years since the player last battled him, and more scarily, Mega Evolving it, since if Karina as the 3rd gym leader was allowed to use Mega Evolution, then Grant as the 4th here should surely be allowed to. Following this would be Geosenge Town, or rather the ruins of it, as it has been left as a monument to the tragedy of that incident. It is here the protagonist encounters and battles Radiata and his ace Pyroar again, cementing him as the secondary rival, and upon defeating him, he speaks mournfully of the incident 2 years ago, and the madman with the hideous heart whose scheme it all was, before bestowing another set of Zygarde cells on the player, and fleeing once again. Next would be Shalor City, which would have evolved into something of a secondary metropolis rivaling Anastar City, as the refugees from Geosinge Town mostly relocated here. Due to already having the power of Mega Evolution and most likely a final stage Johto starter now, there is no need for Karina to teach the player about Mega Evolution, with this instead being a fairly standard 5th gym, with the most notable feature being that Karina Mega evolves her Ace, showing that unlike original X and Y, that will be happening in pretty much every major boss battle moving forward. Likewise, Cormorine is pretty standard fare, with the big shock being that Tieno has replaced Ramos' gym leader, since at the end of X and Y, he is seen hanging around the city pretty permanently, so this feels like a natural step up. Additionally, he has changed the gym from a grass-type gym to a flying gym, as birds still roost in tall trees, and his Battle Maison team is made up of 2 flying types, so it's no stretch to say he could acquire more as part of this role. Once this battle is complete, the player would be met by their rival, who informs them that Professor Sycamore wants them to check out the power plant on Route 13. This would be a short side quest to acquire more Zygarde cells, have a rival battle, and meet a young woman named Emma who is on her own quest to retrace the footsteps of Team Flare, as she believes they are to blame for what is wrong with Carlos, and maybe by understanding it she can reverse it. Following this would be the return to Lumiose and another cutscene with Sycamore, in which he would examine the Keystone Z, which is now far more luminous, and request the player to help him test a theory by bringing that stone back to where they found it on Route 24. This would naturally involve a degree of backtracking, but hey, it's a Pokemon game, so that's par for the course. Once the player is made back home and up the mountain, they would come across the same rock slide they did initially, though at this point their Keystone Z would begin to glow green, with the rocks re-knitting into the mountain as harmony is restored. This at last allows the protagonist to press forward, battling high-level mountain Pokemon until they reach the Runima Plateau, which in X2 is a desiccated husk of a forest with a sinister greyish cocoon at the centre, while in Y2 is a lush and vibrant forest, with a majestic tree at its heart. Either way, when the protagonist gets close, this mysterious object would transform, becoming either a Voltol or Xerneas who had battled the player. Like with X and Y, this would be a forced story capture, in which if the player flees, loses, or defeats the legendary Pokemon, they simply stay where they are until the player finally does capture them. At this point, the protagonist receives a holocaustic call from Sycamore, who congratulates them on catching the legendary and urges them to forge a bond with it, as this may be the secret to unlocking both the Pokemon's full power and the hidden secrets of the Keystone Z. Now with the plot out of the way, at least for a little while, the player can get back to their gym challenge, now able to catch a train from their mountainside station all the way to Lumiose City so they don't have to walk that series of routes again, or they can simply use Fly, which they would definitely have by now, and more than likely use to get back to Clovania in the first place. Either way, once back in Lumiose, the player is free to head north to Laver City, though in the 2 years since X and Y, the beautiful foliage has withered and the gym has moved from the city proper to Lost Hotel, which has been done up, though still maintains its sinister atmosphere. After completing the gym puzzle, which is centered around sneaking past patrolling guards and bellhops, the player would then be able to confront the gym leader Adrian, which means both the Dark One and wealthy, which is fitting since his aesthetic is based around the concept of the gentleman/phantom thief, whose roots lie in French literature, but which has become wildly popular in Japanese media, see Lupin III, Persona 5, etc. Either way, Adrian would use a team of tricky Pokemon, making him a relatively difficult 7th gym leader, and a worthy first ever Dark leader, but ultimately a beatable one if the player battles wisely. Likewise, Olympia as the final gym leader in Anastar City has been buffed a bit to make her a decent test, with the goal being that these last 2 gyms are a good way of preparing the player for the final act, while also ensuring that even if they decide to just use their new box art legendary as a battering ram, they'll be given one gym where they can flex and enjoy their power fantasy having the type advantage, and one where they'll have to use their head. Then, once all 8 badges have been collected, the protagonist will be called down to Route 18 by their rival in Professor Sycamore, who will state that Claire/Pierre attempted to live up to the protagonist's example and tried entering Terminus Cave to battle Zygarde, only to be blown away. As a result, the professor bestows the protagonist with the Master Ball, and urges them as the one who was able to tame the legendary Pokemon living on the plateau to head down into the cave and try to calm Zygarde's rage, as he believes that will bring an end to the natural disasters and allow order to return to Kalos. At this point, Radiata would also appear, and after some questioning from Sycamore, would reveal himself to be an immortal and repentant Lysander, with this being where the name comes in, since Radiata is derived from Lycoris radiata, the scientific name for red spider lilies, which represent death. something Lysander caused through his actions by firing the ultimate weapon, but will never experience himself, while also tying into the name Lysander, which is derived from lilies. Additionally, Radiata shares a root with the word radiation, which is also how infinity energy in the blast from the ultimate weapon is described, making it a fitting alias for Lysander to operate under. With this out in the open, Lysander would explain that he has been trying to atone for his past misdeeds, claiming that when he fired the ultimate weapon, he disrupted the natural order so badly that it was like a wound to Zygarde itself, with the scattered Zygarde cells being the result. However, once they have all been assembled, their power can be used to restore the balance and to unlock the hidden potential of the legendary Pokemon in a way that he never could. At this point, the player will be required to add Xerneas or a Voltol to their team for this dungeon if they haven't already, with the story not progressing until they have, at which point Lysander will gift the player with the final bunch of cells, causing the Keystone Z to transform into a green and black glistening orb, which is now capable of Mega Evolving the box art legendaries. However, these will not be typical Mega Evolutions, as due to manifesting the power of Zygarde, they will take on the physical characteristics of the Order Pokemon, becoming mostly green and black with hex patterning and Zygarde's crown somewhere on their body. Additionally, their types will change to each gain an aspect of Zygarde, with Xerneas becoming the first fairy ground type, while a Voltol becomes a red dark dragon. With this power acquired, the protagonist is then instructed to enter Terminus Cave, where after descending to the bottom, they will do battle with 50% Zygarde. While there is not a mandatory capture like Xerneas and a Voltol, doing so will net the player the ability to use the Keystone Z to either release more Zygarde cells to upgrade to 100% form, or extract cells to reduce it to 10% form. Either way, once Zygarde is caught or defeated, its rage will be quelled, and thus the natural disasters plaguing Kalos will come to an end, just in time for the protagonist to take the newly repaired bridge to Coroway Town, which will lead them back to Snowbell and then on to Victory Road. From here will be a pretty standard series of obstacles, trainers, and an obligatory rival battle at the end, before facing off with the Elite Four. Like last time, these 4 trainers can be fought in any order, though unlike the previous games, there have been some shake-ups in their ranks, with Ramos becoming the first ever Grass Elite Four member replacing Dresner, while Malva explains that she was also made to step down in the wake of her involvement with Team Flare, though she earned her way back up to the position in the intervening years. And as for the champion this go around, it is none other than Emma, with her thanking the protagonist at the start of their battle for doing what she could not. In keeping with the themes of this game, her team would be made up of the Pokemon she received from Xerosic at the end of X and Y, putting them to use for good rather than evil, with her likewise wearing her Essentia costume without the helmet as a symbolic representation of this. Due to her diverse team options, she would make for a fun final challenge, especially if her team could be comprised of 5 of Xerosic's 8 Pokemon chosen randomly, and her friend Mimi now evolved into a Meowstic as a stationary ace, a programming feat we know is possible since the PWT in Black and White 2 did something similar. And with that, the story of Pokemon X2 and Y2 would come to a close, as the protagonist enters the Hall of Fame and is hailed both as the new champion and a hero of Kalos, just like the original XY protagonist. From here, the game would mostly become standard post-game fare, with a battle facility along the lines of the Battle Chateau, some cameos from old faces like Shauna and Trevor, and opportunities to fill out the regional and national Pokédexes, including catching legendaries such as Volcanion and McGinn in special side quests. However, that about wraps up my plans for hypothetical Pokemon X and Y2. If there are any story beats or design features you would like to suggest, or else Pokemon you feel should have gotten Mega Evolutions in these games, please be sure to post them in the comments. Also, if you would like to see me give some of the other Pokemon games like Sun and Moon, or even the earlier games like Red and Blue this treatment, let me know. And if this video receives enough positive reception, I'll turn it into a series. But for now, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you when the journey continues.